Jergens Ultra Healing Moisturizer is being recalled. The FDA says the 3-ounce and 10-ounce bottles may contain a harmful bacteria that can cause infections in people with weakened immune systems.
Your body lotion is absorbed into your bloodstream within 26 seconds of application, not eventually, not partially. Within 26 seconds, your body lotion is actively circulating through your body, reaching your organs, and interacting with your hormonal systems. This video is a journey of the discovery of 7 brands, and will ask a single question for each one. Is what this formula does to your skin consistent with what it is simultaneously doing inside your body? The answers are not what the packaging prepared you for, not even close. Number 7. Jergens Original Scent. Jergens has been in the body lotion category since 1901. That longevity is consistently marketed as heritage, as trust-built and validated across multiple generations of families, as evidence that something this enduring and this widely used must be doing something fundamentally right. Longevity is not the same as safety. Longevity means the marketing worked across generations. Whether the formula deserves the trust that marketing has accumulated is a separate and more important question entirely, and it is precisely the question the heritage narrative is specifically and expertly designed to prevent you from pausing long enough to ask. The Jergens Original Scent Daily Moisturizer leads with water and then moves to glycerin and a mineral oil derivative, both functional moisturizing ingredients with long and largely uncontroversial safety records at appropriate concentrations. Up to this point in the ingredient list, the formula is unremarkable and largely defensible. Then the fragrance entry appears, and behind it, the preservative system. This is where the formula stops being unremarkable and starts being a conversation worth having in careful and specific detail. The fragrance in Jergens Original Scent is not a minor background note added for a pleasant application experience. It is a central and defining feature of the product, the thing the name literally references and celebrates, the primary identity signal the brand has built its heritage positioning around for over a century of continuous marketing. That fragrance is undisclosed at the compound level. The single word fragrance on an ingredient list can legally represent a proprietary blend of dozens of individual chemical compounds, including benzyl benzoate, linalool, and limonene, all documented contact allergens with established and peer-reviewed sensitization profiles in the dermatological literature. It can also include synthetic musks, a category of fragrance compounds with documented endocrine-disrupting activity in peer-reviewed research that has been accumulating for decades without producing meaningful regulatory response in the US market. Synthetic musks accumulate in fatty tissue over time. They do not metabolize and clear efficiently. They have been detected in human breast milk, in umbilical cord blood, and in the bloodstream of people with no occupational chemical exposure. Beyond the daily use of fragranced personal care products, they bind to estrogen receptors. They interfere with androgen signaling. They disrupt thyroid hormone pathways. They do not wash off between applications because they have already been absorbed, distributed, and stored in the body's fatty tissue long before the next application occurs. The preservative system in Jergens Original Scent includes DMDM hydantoin, a formaldehyde releaser. Formaldehyde releasers function by slowly and continuously releasing small amounts of formaldehyde into the formula over its shelf life, which effectively prevents microbial growth, but also means that every single application deposits a low-level formaldehyde exposure directly onto the skin of a person applying this lotion to their full body surface area every morning. Formaldehyde is a documented sensitizer and a classified human carcinogen at occupational exposure levels. The debate around cosmetic-level exposure concentrations is ongoing and unresolved. What is not debated is the mechanism. What is not debated is the daily accumulation. This is the lotion that has been trusted across generations of families. The formula is why that trust was never fully earned by the product underneath the heritage packaging. The next brand spent considerable resources building a reputation for natural, botanical, ingredient-conscious goodness. The front of the bottle communicates everything the Jergens bottle does not even attempt to suggest. The back of the bottle tells a story the front was specifically designed to prevent you from reading. Number 6. Vaseline Intensive Care Calming Lavender. Vaseline built its foundational and genuinely earned credibility on a single ingredient, petroleum jelly. Unfragranced, chemically inert, deeply occlusive, and remarkably effective at what it does. The original Vaseline product is one of the most dermatologist-recommended topical ingredients in existence, with a safety and efficacy record spanning over a century of documented clinical and consumer use. The The trust the Vaseline name carries was built by that original product. It was earned honestly through a formula that did exactly one thing extremely well and added nothing unnecessary to complicate the result. The intensive care line is not that product. It is a product line built strategically on the trust the original product earned, then extended into a range where the formula decisions are significantly more complicated, more contested, and more consequential than petroleum jelly applied to dry skin. The calming lavender variant leads the endocrine concern conversation immediately because lavender is not just the scent choice. It is the stated and marketed active ingredient, the reason the variant exists, the claim around which the product was formulated and positioned. Lavender essential oil contains linalool and linalool derivatives, compounds with documented estrogenic activity in peer-reviewed research that has moved from preliminary findings to clinical case documentation over the past decade. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism identified lavender oil and tea tree oil as probable endocrine disruptors following investigation of prepubertal gynecomastia cases, a condition involving hormone-driven breast tissue development in young boys in patients with documented and exclusive topical exposure to products containing these oils. This is not fringe or preliminary research. This is peer-reviewed, editorially reviewed, published endocrinology with clinical case documentation in one of the most respected journals in the specialty. Applying a lavender-forward body lotion to the full body surface area every single day represents a significant, repeated, and cumulative topical exposure to a compound with documented hormonal activity in human subjects. This concern is particularly acute for children and adolescents whose endocrine systems are in active and sensitive developmental phases, where hormonal signaling is performing critical and time-dependent biological work that synthetic disruption can affect in ways that do not become visible for years. The formula also contains DMDM hydantoin, the same formaldehyde-releasing preservative appearing in Jergens, alongside triethanolamine, an ingredient that forms nitrosamines, a class of compounds with established carcinogenic classification when it interacts with certain other formula components under specific pH and temperature conditions. The European Union has moved to restrict triethanolamine concentrations in leave-on cosmetics. US regulations have not followed that restriction. Vaseline built extraordinary and legitimate trust on petroleum jelly. This product borrows that trust entirely and applies it to a formula the original product never once prepared you to accept without examination. Number 5. Bath & Body Works core fragrance line. Bath & Body Works does not position itself as a clean brand. It positions itself as an indulgent, immersive, powerfully sensory, and experiential brand, and it executes that positioning with commercial effectiveness that is genuinely difficult to argue with on its own terms. The stores smell a specific and carefully engineered way from the moment you approach the entrance. The seasonal launches create genuine anticipation and social conversation. The promotional structures create a purchasing volume that makes the per-unit cost feel like exceptional value for a product that delivers a real and immediately pleasurable experience. The formula is the one variable the experience is specifically and expertly designed to prevent you from pausing to examine. The core body lotion range leads almost universally with a fragrance-forward formula construction. The fragrance loads in Bath & Body Works products are among the highest documented in the mass-market personal care category. This is not an oversight or a legacy formulation choice that has not been updated. It is deliberate design serving a deliberate commercial strategy. The scent is the product. The moisturization is secondary, supporting, and largely incidental. The formula exists to deliver the fragrance experience, and every other ingredient decision is made in direct service of that single overriding commercial objective. Those fragrance blends are undisclosed at the compound level. They contain synthetic musks, phthalates in several documented formulations, and known contact allergens at concentrations that dermatologists consistently and specifically identify as problematic for daily full-body application on adult skin, let alone on children's skin, or on the skin of pregnant women whose developing fetuses have no barrier against transplacentally transferred endocrine-disrupting compounds. Phthalates are plasticizing compounds used in fragrance formulation to extend scent longevity on the skin. They are documented endocrine disruptors, formally classified as such by the European Chemicals Agency, and associated in peer-reviewed epidemiological research with disruptions to testosterone production, thyroid hormone function, insulin sensitivity, and reproductive development in children exposed during critical developmental windows before and after birth. The moisturizing base uses a combination of glycerin, dimethicone, and petrolatum derivatives. It is functional. It is largely unremarkable. It occludes, it reduces transepidermal water loss, and it creates the skin feel that registers as effective moisturization in the first minutes after application. The hormonal activity you cannot feel, register, or attribute to any single application is the fragrance blend working systemically at the receptor level, in the bloodstream, at the endocrine sites that regulate the biological processes most people never think about until they stop working correctly. The sensory experience is exceptional by design. The formula underneath it is not. If this investigation is making you look at the lotion on your bathroom shelf with different eyes, hit the like button and subscribe. Every week, we open the ingredient list on the products you use daily without question, and what we find is almost never what the packaging suggested you would find. Number 4. Olay Quench. Classic formula. Olay is one of the most trusted names in body and facial skincare across global markets. The brand carries the accumulated weight of decades of dermatologist recommendations, clinical-sounding marketing language, and the kind of quiet, unquestioned authority that comes from being present in bathrooms across the world for long enough that its presence stopped requiring justification and started functioning as its own evidence. That trust is precisely what makes the formula examination so important and so overdue. The more trusted the brand, the less likely the consumer is to question what is actually in the bottle they reach for automatically every morning before they have fully woken up. The Olay Quench Classic Lotion uses a silicone-heavy base that creates the immediate slip and smoothness associated with the product's finish and the tactile sensation of effective moisturization. Behind that comes a fragrance entry, undisclosed at the compound level, present in a formula designed for full-body daily application across a lifetime of habitual use. The Olay fragrance load is lower than Bath & Body Works by a meaningful margin, but present at concentrations sufficient to carry the same category concerns around synthetic musk bioaccumulation and cumulative sensitization risk that make fragrance the most important variable to examine in any leave-on personal care formula. The formula includes BHT, butylated hydroxytoluene, an antioxidant preservative with a contested and genuinely unresolved regulatory history that illustrates the broader problem with evaluating cosmetic ingredient safety through regulatory compliance alone. The European Union classifies BHT as a potential endocrine disruptor and has moved to restrict its use in cosmetic formulations. The US Food and Drug Administration classifies it as generally recognized as safe. Those two classifications exist simultaneously and without resolution, covering the same compound, being applied to the same skin, in a product used daily across decades of application. Choosing to cite only the more permissive regulatory position does not resolve the disagreement. It simply means that the person applying the lotion is the one absorbing the uncertainty. The parabens picture at Olay has improved in recent reformulations, with the brand making visible moves away from certain paraben forms in direct response to consumer pressure and market awareness rather than internal formulation ethics. That movement is real, measurable, and worth acknowledging honestly. It is also worth noting clearly that it was market pressure rather than proactive formulation integrity that drove the change, which raises a straightforward and important question. What else in the current formula is waiting for sufficient consumer pressure before the brand decides it needs to be addressed? The brand that follows this one built its entire marketing proposition around being the natural, ingredient-conscious answer to exactly the formulation problems we have just described in detail. The ingredient list reveals, with uncomfortable clarity, how far the formula reality sits from that carefully constructed proposition. Number 3. Aveeno Daily Moisturizing Lotion. Aveeno occupies a specific and carefully constructed position in the body lotion category. It is the brand that bridges mass-market accessibility and clinical credibility with more precision and more consistency than almost any other brand operating at this price point. The oat imagery, the dermatologist recommendation language, the measured and serious packaging that communicates clinical intention rather than indulgent aspiration. The brand has built, with sustained marketing precision across decades, the widespread impression of a formula that belongs closer to the pharmacy dispensary shelf than the beauty aisle it actually sits in. That positioning deserves to be examined against the ingredient list with the same precision the marketing applies to building the impression. Aveeno Daily Moisturizing Lotion leads with colloidal oatmeal, a genuinely beneficial and thoroughly documented ingredient with substantial peer-reviewed evidence for barrier support, anti-inflammatory activity, and documented suitability for sensitized, reactive, and eczema-prone skin across multiple clinical population studies. The National Eczema Association seal of acceptance on several Aveeno products reflects a real, externally reviewed, and independently maintained clinical standard. These credentials are earned through the formula, not purchased through a marketing budget. And they matter in a category where most clinical-sounding language is doing no clinical work at all. The formula also contains benzaldehyde, a fragrance compound and potential sensitizer, present in the ingredient list under its specific chemical name, rather than the broader and less transparent fragrance designation used by most competitors. That disclosure practice is more honest and more useful to the ingredient-aware consumer than the single-word fragrance entry that conceals everything behind it. And it deserves acknowledgement as a step toward transparency. The preservative system includes parabens in several variants of the daily moisturizing lotion, though the brand has moved toward paraben reduction in reformulations under the same kind of consumer awareness pressure that moved Olay. The dimethicone and petrolatum base provides effective occlusion and genuine barrier support, earning Aveeno its place as a brand where the core formulation logic is more defensible than any of its mass-market competitors examined earlier in this investigation. The problem is not that Aveeno is performing poorly against clinical standards. The problem is that the sustained clinical positioning creates a specific and powerful expectation of formulation rigor that the fragrance entries and preservative decisions do not fully honor across the complete product range. Aveeno is better than most brands in this investigation by a meaningful margin. It is not as unconditionally clean as the dermatologist recommendation language implies consistently and without qualification. That gap between the clinical positioning and the formula reality is smaller here than anywhere else on this list, but it exists, it is documentable, and it matters for the person applying this lotion daily to their full body surface, in the belief that the clinical packaging reflects a clinical standard throughout the formula. The next brand closes that gap almost entirely. Almost. One ingredient, present across part of the range, held it back from the top two. And it is an ingredient so universally present across the personal care category that most consumers have entirely stopped registering it as a variable worth examining. Number 2. CeraVe Moisturizing Cream. CeraVe was developed in direct collaboration with dermatologists, a claim that carries specific and verifiable meaning here, rather than the vague, unattributed dermatologist-tested language deployed as a marketing device by brands that have never subjected their formulas to genuine clinical review. The collaboration is documented in the brand's founding record. The formulation philosophy is publicly stated and consistently applied. The result is a barrier restoration system built around the 3 ceramides present in healthy human skin at the stratum corneum level: ceramide NP, ceramide AP, and ceramide EOP, alongside hyaluronic acid and cholesterol, in ratios specifically informed by the published research on what the outermost layer of the skin actually requires to maintain its structural integrity and its function as a barrier against transepidermal water loss and environmental irritant penetration. This is not marketing language wearing clinical vocabulary as a costume. It is clinical vocabulary accurately describing a genuine formulation decision that was made by people who understood the underlying biology and built the formula to reflect it. The ceramide system in CeraVe is not decorative, and it is not present in concentrations too low to contribute meaningfully to the formula's stated purpose. It is doing the work the product claims it is doing, in the biological mechanism the research supports, at concentrations that reflect functional intent. The patented multivesicular emulsion technology delivers actives in a controlled time-released format across hours of wear, meaning the ceramides are not simply deposited on the surface, where friction, clothing, and daily activity remove them before they can contribute to barrier repair. They are delivered gradually into the epidermal layers over an extended period, which is consistent with how barrier repair at the stratum corneum level actually functions in the biological timeframe relevant to skin recovery. This is a formulation innovation with documented clinical support behind it, and it earns CeraVe its position at the top of this investigation with genuine and defensible justification. The formula is fragrance-free. It is free from parabens. It contains no known endocrine disrupting compounds at concentrations of documented concern in the current peer-reviewed literature. The Environmental Working Group rates the moisturizing cream in the low hazard range across the full and detailed ingredient level review. The reason CeraVe sits at number 2 rather than claiming the top position without reservation is a single ingredient, sodium lauryl sulfate, present in the cleanser range and in several lotion formulations as a texture-modifying agent. Sodium lauryl sulfate is the same ingredient dermatologists use as a positive control in patch testing, the reliable benchmark compound for producing skin irritation in a controlled experimental setting. Because its ability to compromise the barrier is consistent and predictable, its presence in any formulation marketed around barrier restoration and sensitive skin suitability is a formulation contradiction that is difficult to reconcile with the clinical standard the brand has otherwise built its reputation on. In the moisturizing cream specifically, the formula is among the most defensible and most scientifically grounded in this entire investigation. The sodium lauryl sulfate concern is real. It is documented in the same clinical literature the rest of the formula was built from, and it keeps CeraVe one step from the unconditional top position it would otherwise deserve. One brand left: no synthetic fragrance, no parabens, no endocrine disrupting compounds at any concentration of concern, no formulation contradiction between the marketing claim and the ingredient list. A founding philosophy that has governed every ingredient decision for over a century without deviation or acquisition pressure. Number 1. Weleda Skin Food. Weleda was founded in 1921, and the brand has operated under a biodynamic and anthroposophic philosophy for over a century of continuous production. That philosophical origin is not relevant as a heritage marketing credential or as a feel-good brand story designed to create emotional attachment. It is relevant because it produced a set of absolute formulation constraints that have governed every ingredient decision across 100 years of product development, and those constraints are more demanding, more consistent, and more protective of the person applying the product than the regulatory frameworks of any single country the brand currently operates in. The formulation standard is simple, clearly stated, and non-negotiable in practice. If the ingredient cannot be sourced from a natural and biologically compatible origin and justified within the anthroposophic framework governing the brand's entire operation, it is not in the formula, not in this product, not in any product. No exceptions negotiated for cost, for performance, or for market competitiveness. No synthetic fragrance, no parabens, no petroleum derivatives beyond what exists naturally in plant oils, no synthetic preservatives, no endocrine disrupting compounds by category, no formaldehyde releases, no phthalates, no silicones. The list of exclusions is not the result of consumer pressure or regulatory movement. It is the original formulation standard, established before modern endocrinology existed as a discipline and arriving, through a different intellectual and philosophical route, at many of the same protective conclusions that the peer-reviewed endocrine disruption research now supports from the scientific direction. The Weleda Skin Food original ultra-rich cream uses sweet almond oil, sunflower seed oil, beeswax, and a botanical extract system built around pansy, chamomile, and rosemary as its core functional actives. These are not decorative botanical entries positioned near the bottom of an ingredient list to justify a natural claim on the front label. They appear at concentrations consistent with their documented anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and barrier-supportive functions in the published literature on these specific plant extracts. The fragrance in Weleda Skin Food is derived entirely from natural essential oils rather than from the synthetic fragrance compound systems used across the rest of this investigation. This distinction is enormously consequential in the endocrine disruption conversation because the primary compounds of documented concern in synthetic fragrance, the musk compounds that bioaccumulate in fatty tissue, the phthalate carriers that disrupt testosterone and thyroid signaling, the petrochemical derivatives that interact with estrogen receptors, are entirely and categorically absent from a naturally derived essential oil fragrance system constructed without synthetic chemistry. The formula is certified natural by NATRU, an international certification standard with specific, publicly documented, and independently audited criteria for natural and organic cosmetic formulation. The brand holds Leaping Bunny certification for cruelty-free status across the full supply chain, not just the finished product. The Environmental Working Group rates Skin Food in the low hazard range across the complete ingredient review. The formula has been essentially unchanged for decades, not because the brand lacks the resources or the technical capability to reformulate, but because there has been no internal reason to change it. No reformulation pressure from a parent conglomerate optimizing for margin, no cost reduction incentive driven by a recent acquisition, no quarterly earnings conversation requiring the substitution of a more expensive naturally derived ingredient with a cheaper synthetic equivalent that performs similarly in consumer testing. Weleda has remained independently owned and philosophically consistent for over 100 years. That structural independence is the foundational guarantee of the formulation integrity the product record consistently reflects. You cannot maintain a century-long commitment to biodynamic sourcing, natural formulation, and anthroposophic ingredient philosophy under the ownership of a conglomerate whose fiduciary obligation runs to shareholders rather than to the skin of the person applying the product. Weleda never had to test that incompatibility because it never accepted that ownership structure. Around $15 to $18. Certified natural by an independent international standard. Biodynamic sourcing with a documented and auditable supply chain. A formulation philosophy that has governed every ingredient decision for over a century, and that arrived through a philosophical route rather than a scientific one, at the same protective conclusions that modern endocrine disruption research now supports from the laboratory direction. This is what a body lotion looks like when the formula was never designed, at any point in its 100-year history, to do anything except be genuinely and unconditionally good for the body it is applied to. So that's it. Pick up your body lotion right now. Find the fragrance entry. Search it alongside the words synthetic musk endocrine disruption. Search the preservative alongside formaldehyde releaser. Search the first 3 ingredients alongside hormone disruption risk. 3 searches. That is the entire distance between trusting the bottle and understanding what is inside it. Click the next video right now. What we found next is worse.